It's 5 o'clock. It's time to start the June 17th meeting. Commissioner Stewart, you leave us an invocation in the pledge.
Please stand and join us. Heavenly Father, again, we thank you for this opportunity to come and serve our citizens of Wakulla County. We thank you for this beautiful place we live. Lord, I just ask that you give us wisdom tonight. And most of all, Lord, I just ask you to help us get it through this audit report. And these things we ask in your name.
Amen.
Amen.
Allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Mr. Chairman, I believe that this is Quincy's first audit presentation. This is my ninth. All I can say is prepare to be riveted.
Okay. Thanks, Randy. I know you'll help me get through it.
Okay.
Glad I'm on this side.
Welcome everyone tonight. There will be numerous chances for citizens to speak. There's a citizens to be heard in the beginning and the end of the meeting, and you can speak on any item as it comes forward. If you would like to speak, turn in a card to Miss Patty and give us your name and address when you come up. I have the approval of the agenda.
I will approve agenda, but I want to pull consent 5 off.
Second. Okay, we have a motion to approve with number 5 being removed. All in favor?
Aye.
Passes 5-0. Citizens to be heard?
None?
All right, awards and presentations. Tonight we have one from Mr. Mike Watkins.
You two guys will take longer than the rest of the whole board meeting, I can assure you.
I'll try to be efficient and quick. Thank you, Commissioners and Mr. County Administrator. Appreciate the opportunity. I happen to live in Wakulla County. I'm joined with Marcia Mathis, who's also a resident of Wakulla County. I'm CEO of Big Bend Community-Based Care. We have some information and a handout for you. And just to let you know that mental health and child welfare is a big issue for our country, for our state, for our county. And I can tell you in Panacea, there's a lot of needs in Panacea particularly. At Big Bend Community-Based Care, we're basically the administrative services organization. So we're managing all the budget around child welfare and behavioral health. We're right here on High Street behind you. We own the property, what most people would probably refer to as Dis Village. So that's where most of our workers are for Wakulla County, work out of that office. And then, of course, Appalachia Center, which is just adjacent to the Sheriff's Office. Those are my two primary providers, Dis Village and Appalachia, that do the work for us in Wakulla County. On the next slide, you'll see that we're spreading that $115 million of state and federal monies across a number of providers that you're probably familiar with, like Children's Home Society, the two I mentioned, 211 of the Big Bend, etc. So you start spreading it across 18 counties, and it goes quicker than you might think. We happen to be one of 17 that do the child protection. So they're in the brown and kind of red. It's hard to see the colors there, but Judicial Circuit 14 and 2 is pretty symmetrical, basically Panama City and Tallahassee, and then the outlying counties. Those are the areas of function that we're responsible for in child welfare. And then we're also responsible for all of the panhandle, again, from Pensacola over to Madison Taylor, for substance use mental health. It's unique, and the reason why I point this out is all of your peers have one. Everybody has a managing aide that's responsible for state mental health and substance abuse funds. And all of your peers have a CBC that's responsible for child protection, every single county. We happen to be the only one that does both. So when you look across the state, we're a bit of an anomaly, and we're managing the whole thing for the Panhandle. In terms of scale, you can see kind of bottom right-hand corner, about 3,000 kids are coming through the child protection system for Judicial Circuits 2 and 14. We put out a monthly report card. We modified this one for your presentation, so you'll see on the right-hand column, a column that's labeled Wakulla. That's not a new month. Commissioners, that's just the Wakulla breakout for the month of May for your purposes. And just to give you an idea, we get about 29 abuse reports in Wakulla on a monthly basis. We have 30 children in foster care on any given day. As of May, we had 30. We had no kids in Wakulla County specifically in our jurisdiction that were that were available for adoption. Of course, there's some in other counties that Wakulla residents could adopt. Then a couple of other nice little pieces here. We just had 100 foster homes. Really need the community support. This is a volunteer process. It takes a special person to open their heart and open their home to a foster child that's there on a temporary basis. So we'd love to have your support and community outreach around foster care itself. On Baker Acts, a big issue that faces our state. If you're familiar with it, it's involuntary placement of a person for mental health reasons. And of course the Marchman Act goes along with that for substance abuse. And you can see the statewide average as of 16-17, our last full fiscal year. You see a couple 100,000 people in our state are being Baker Acted. Of that, you can see for Northwest about 12,000 where the red arrow is. About 12,000 to 13,000 people are being Baker Acted involuntary. I'll say this, I think I've said it all to you before, but for everyone else in the audience's edification, if your truck breaks down when you leave this meeting, you can get a tow truck and you can get it, to the house, but there's still something wrong with the truck. And that's what I would submit to you on Baker Acts. Most people are there for less than 3 days. As you know, it requires a court order to keep somebody beyond 3 days. And if they do that, I would submit to you that what got them there probably isn't fixed. They're just in a temporary position where they're stable. A lot of that 200,000 across the state is people just not managing their own meds. There's people that require medication to be stable. But there's also people that have first episodic breaks that have, run into, life problems, crisis, personality disorders. And that's really more than a 3-day issue. As we've seen through our experience. Here in Wakulla County, this is a Wakulla County slide. The last state fiscal year data, 240 incidents of Baker Act. I can tell you that number has gone up significantly. So each of you all as commissioners and as a county administrator, you're having probably 300 to 400 Baker Acts. So on any given day, one to two a day. Major Kent may be able to speak to that more, but they're seeing them on the road, I promise you, on a frequent basis. There's some additional data here. You can look at age groups and gender on your own time, but in the interest of the 10 minutes, I want to tell you about two programs that the legislature passed through Senate Bill 7026, which was the Marjorie Stoneman Douglas Act. One was community action teams. So you can see here, Wakulla's lumped in with Leon and Gadsden. That's 35 kids that we can serve at any given time. It's very intensive. It's up to a year. They work in the community, in the homes with the family. So it's an expensive resource, but there's only 35 slots. So we have worked very closely with Miss English and with the school system to try to make sure that we're getting the right kids that need that intensive service. And often, I can tell you, it's also the family that needs the help. We also have mobile crisis teams. And the thing about this is we've contracted with Sheriff Miller. Under the statute, we have 59 minutes to respond to a mental health break. And the idea is to prevent a Baker Act. So that's not, if someone's cut themselves or someone's got brandishing a weapon or if someone swallowed a bunch of pills, those are not candidates for mobile crisis team. But if someone's threatening or they're in a bad place, they think they might hurt themselves, mobile crisis team is an option. I'm going to show you some data where we think we can eliminate or reduce the number of Baker Acts, which is we believe to be a positive. So just to give you an idea, the legislature passed this in March of last year. We got the money in September. We had it under contract by November. And if you see this slide here, you can see the number of mobile crisis teams serving went steadily up in the second and third quarters of the fiscal year. Those numbers are even higher since April. And if you look at the next slide, I can tell you that through April, we had 37 calls for a mobile crisis team. That's 37 people that didn't get sent to Tallahassee to the Baker Act facility. So I view that as a good thing. And beyond just not having to go roll them and taking a deputy off the road and taking them somewhere where they're just being kind of babysat, we actually are therapeutically intervening with them through Appalachia Center, and they can do that up to a week. And the great news is once they got their foot in the door, They then have a therapeutic overseer, a therapist that can get them beyond 7 days if they need to go on for additional counseling. To give you an idea, Appalachia Center, which operates the 8 counties on our side, out of the 175 incidents, I mentioned 37 of them were Wakulla. 88% of them, that's the second bar from the left, 154 or 88% of them did not require going on to the Baker Act. So 88%, pretty high compliance. So those are the kinds of services I kind of implore you to know about and to think about when you're interacting with the public. We think it's a critical service. I will tell you, in the Panhandle, we've never had a community action team in the community. We've never had a mobile crisis team in the community. We've been paying for detox, deep in beds, Baker X, and basically make an appointment, come see me 2 weeks from now, 3 weeks from now. This is an opportunity, the way the research is going and science is going. We're just finally getting our share that some of the places in South Florida and Central Florida already had, where we can serve our community in the community. Now, we're pretty close to Tallahassee and making your appointments, but you can imagine the further you get away from the Beltway, further you get away from downtown Tallahassee, the harder it is for people to get to their appointments. The eligibility, real quick, I'll end on this. We serve everybody that doesn't have insurance. So it's basically the state's safety net. If you don't have Blue Cross Blue Shield, if you don't have Medicaid, then this is the pot of money that pays for usually deep end court order type services. It does not require court order, but that's a lot of the people that we normally get. So I'd be happy to answer any questions and answers for you. Marcia's full-time. She works right here on High Street. I live here and drive back and forth through the 18 counties, so I'm available to you. And I want to make sure that we're getting our fair share of services for Wakulla.
What do you find the cause for the increase in Baker Acts? What is that usually around?
In terms of the cause,
Yeah.
we're seeing just a tremendous increase in anxiety. Anxiety is the #1 marker for mental health disorder. So things like societal pressures, cell phones, social media, employment, hurricane. There's any number of things that are increasing. I think we've become the intensity level. I've seen some articles recently, particularly for our kids, our young people, that, you know, if I had something to say to you, Mike, you and I may say that at a football game on a Friday night or something. Now, my 10-year-old sitting right here, if someone wants to text her while we're doing this presentation,
And right now.
someone can text her, Facebook her, put her name on Facebook. There's any number of things that people do, in my humble opinion, that are increasing the level of anxiety for folks.
Wow. I don't know how many of you met personally with him. Did everybody get a chance to meet with Mike?
I haven't met personally with him.
I did. I was impressed with your program. I mean, it's good for our community. It really is. So we need to take advantage of it.
Yes, we definitely need to have our local government plugged in and participating in the process, because I know that the need's there. I promise you we got more than 10 or 12 kids that need mental health services.
Right.
And I can tell you for sure, experience, Mike has been a tremendous help to us by responding, and every time we've called him, it's like that quick. So it's been a big benefit to us.
Good.
Takes a long time, actually, and money.
I was just curious, on one of the slides it had Leon County with 82 calls and Wakulla
Yes,
County
sir.
with 37.
Yes, sir.
Why were we so high?
And frankly, I think Sheriff Miller and Major Kemp are touching on it. It's a level of
Education.
understanding and knowledge that it's available. So there's some counties on there. Let me just give you an example, like Gulf County. There's no reason in the world why Gulf County, I guarantee you they've had more than one case. But what we have found is where the utilization is high is you got a school superintendent that's plugged in along with his staff, and you got the sheriff plugged in. When you got those pieces, and because they're the ones, I would submit to you that your law enforcement are the front line of mental health.
Yeah.
They're the front line mental health responder. So if they know what they're looking at, they're going to get us involved.
So that's telling us that our law enforcement's better than all the other counties.
I think it's a testament to Sheriff Miller and Major Kemp.
Well, it is, so.
Yes, sir.
Thank you.
Yes.
Well, we also made it where every one of our guys go through crisis intervention training now, so it's mandated by that's when the sheriff took office. It was also done for our SROs, but we made every one of our deputies go through it. And plus, we make every one of them go through the 3-day Baker Act training now to more understand it, because you can also be sued under Baker Act if somebody's diagnosed with schizophrenia, and you got to be careful just because they're diagnosed with a mental illness. Don't mean you Baker Act them. So there's a lot of liability that comes with it also.
Okay.
Thank you.
Thank you, Mike.
Thank you, Mike.
Thank you, appreciate it.
Have a good one.
Here we go.
Lord help us.
Mr. Powell,
He should have done, Mike should have done his presentation after
10-minute
him.
presentation. Patty?
Okay.
Got the closing
Okay. Set the
This is my 14th.
Okay.
14th.
Yes.
Only my ninth.
14th.
Same guy.
Jealous
Same
of you.
guy. Okay. It's a pleasure delivering the annual audit of Wakulla County. A quick review. An audit of a county is an audit of the Board of County Commissioners, each of the 5 constitutional officers, and then when the report is prepared, there's a tab for each of the constitutional officers, and the first tab is the county-wide. I always have to say in the last few years, your finance office has prepared your entire report, which is unusual for a small county, very commendable, and you're possibly the smallest county in size that has that does that. So in this case, your staff prepared the report, we reviewed it, and so this is the presentation. I will warn you, the report now is 294 pages.
Ready to go rolling.
But as always, I will try and bring out the major points that I consider important, and then be pleased to answer any concerns, address any concerns of the board.
Feel free to round numbers, too. if you
Okay.
like.
On page 2 and 3 is the audit opinion. It states it's a complete audit of the county, conducted in accordance with applicable auditing standards that include the financial auditing standards, the government auditing standards, the federal single audit standards, and the state single audit standards. So there's 4 levels of required audit procedures. In an audit, what you seek is a clean, unmodified opinion that states that the financial statements are an accurate reflection of how the county stood at the end of the year, what transpired financially during the year. You have that highest level of assurance, and this is reflective of the board and all the officers, which is a good indication of the quality of the financial records and practices of the county as a whole. The next section, beginning on page 4, management's discussion and analysis, is some required overview information on the county, but due to the fact that it is derived from the financial statements, I'll ask that you review that on your own, and I'll go to the pertinent financial statements. First one being on page 26. The county operates under governmental fund accounting principles. You have 2 types of operating funds, governmental funds and the enterprise funds. You have, I think, 45 of the governmental funds. So this statement shows the major funds and then a column for the rest of them. So the first the column is general fund, and that's a combination of all of the general funds of the board and officers. The total assets, $5,876,227. Liabilities, $1,062,820. Fund balances or cash reserves. Total fund balances in general fund, $4,813,407. Of all of these funds, fund balances are $15,054,873. If you look at the assigned, unassigned fund balances of the general fund and then the fund balance of the sheriff's office fund, it represents about 3 months of operating expenses, and it's a good amount to have. You shouldn't have anything below that, but you have adequate reserves in those funds. The next statement, right on page 27, is the statement of revenues, expenditures, and changes in fund balance. So for the general fund, again, the revenues were $20,392,009. Expenditures, $22,745,183. You have various transfers in and out, but the bottom line for the general fund is that you were positive $379,923, which raised that fund balance to the $4.8 million. Overall, for all of these funds, the revenues were $37,609,743. Expenditures $36,738,666. Overall, after all of the transfers in and out, the county as a whole for these funds increased reserves by $2.4 million. So you were, in all of these funds, you were stronger by $2.4 million at the end of the year than at the beginning of the year, which reflects, the budgetary management of the county as a whole. The next type of funds I mentioned were the enterprise funds. You have two enterprise funds, sewer funds, solid waste funds. The intent of an enterprise fund is to operate off of user charges so you don't have to subsidize these operations. Because enterprise funds operate under business accounting principles, the balance sheet is called a statement of net position. So for the total assets, substantial assets of these funds are the capital assets. Total assets, $38,880,233. Liabilities, $1,006,000. Current liabilities, total liabilities, $9,442,476. And the majority of that is in the notes payable and the landfill liability. The net position is the net worth of these funds. The total net position, substantial, $29,437,757. The unrestricted portion of the net position is approximately the same as unreserved fund balance, which is a little over $3 million. And so what you'll see in a minute is that reserve will pay for about 1 year of your operating expenses in those two funds. So that means you're very liquid. The next statement on page 30 is the statement of revenues, expenses, and changes in that position. Your operating revenues were $6.2 million. Operating expenses, $3,064,000. Operating profit, $3,141,304. You have various grants, transfers in and out, so the change in net position, this is mainly because of the $8 million in grants that you received. You increased the net position by $10.9 million. So this was a very healthy, successful year, and it was, and the majority of that was major improvements you made in the sewer area. So after it are the notes and disclosures. I'll just mention a couple. On page 54 is a table that shows your capital assets. And for the governmental assets, the cost basis, $109 million. Accumulated depreciation, $44 million. And net assets, about $65 million. So what does that tell you? It tells you that these assets are about 40% depreciated, and it means that your assets here are not as old as other counties your size. Everyone's hitting on about the 50% that I see, and so you're keeping up with your capital assets. But it also, if you look over on the next page, you're incurring $3.3 million in depreciation every year. That's not a cash expense, but you're using up these assets by $3 million a year, which is a reason to build reserves when you can. and that's all the way from vehicles, sheriff's vehicles, roads, everything. But a substantial amount of, then in your enterprise assets, the cost basis, 46 million, accumulated depreciation, 11 million, net assets, 35 million. These assets are only about 24% used up, which means they're newer, well newer than many others. And it's also, it's a reflection on the many grants that you've had for the infrastructure improvements. Okay, the next thing I always like to look at is the debt of the county. So on page 63, again, the governmental debt, long-term liabilities, 28,225,126. But when you look at the detail of that, your FRS liability is $22.5 million of that. And what FRS liability is, it's a few years ago, government members are required to show their proportion of the FRS, the total net liability on your financial statements. And I think that of the total liabilities, $40 billion, but your $22.5 million is your share of that. You probably won't ever have to pay that bill, but you'll pay it annually by higher rates, and that's clear. Okay, in the business type debt, the end of the year it was $8,676,345, and so again that consists of some of the debt regarding your infrastructure expansion and the liability to close the landfill. Okay, so financially I would say you had a successful year. Overall you were well stronger at the end of the year than at the beginning of the year in both the governmental and enterprise. So that means you strengthened reserves, you lived within your budget.
Great summary.
On page 123 is our report regarding audit procedures required by government auditing standards. These procedures go beyond just financial issues and include internal control over financial reporting, compliance with various laws, regulations, grant terms. In this report, there are no findings or question costs. Page 125, 126 is the report regarding audit procedures required by federal single audits because of the amount of federal grants that you had. The Federal Single Audit Act kicked in, and that mainly requires additional compliance procedures regarding the major programs. This report has no findings or question costs. 127, 128 is the equivalent report regarding the state grants that you received, and again additional compliance procedures regarding the major programs, and it had no findings or question costs in it. After it is a 3 or 4 page report that is called the Schedule of Expenditures of Federal Awards and State Financial Assistance. In this year, your federal grants were $2.6 million. Your state grants totaled $11,491,000. So in this year, you had $14 million in grants that made public improvements to the county and required audit procedures. And so out of all of those, we performed required procedures and had no findings or question costs.
You're on page 129 still?
129, I'd be happy to go back to that.
130, I'm sorry, I'm just trying to follow it up.
Oh, I'm sorry, yes, okay, yes, okay. Okay, the numbers, I appreciate you following. Okay, if you look on page 130, there's the total of federal grants, and it is, you see the $2,597,546. Then it starts the listing of the state grants, and on page 133 is the total of state grants, and the state grants were 491, 456.
I got you.
It's not totaled here, but when you add them together, it's a $14 million.
I got it.
So,
Any idea how that compares to other small counties our size?
you all are very, very active in grants. Let me tell you that. You're very active, and and it's good. It's very, very good.
We don't have enough.
But I didn't say you had to. I'm saying that you're very active.
Need more.
No, it's interesting because I know that we regularly audit 4 counties, and there's sometimes ebbs and flows depending on and I think it's the combination of the management and the board where they get together and say, hey, we need to get grants and let's do it, and we do whatever we have, and so you clearly are doing it in Wakulla.
That's more than our ad valorem revenue, just in those 2 categories.
So it's, and almost all of it's improvements. It's not spent on salaries and things. It's some permanent things.
It's permanent stuff, so
That'll-
there's a big difference.
Yeah, so, okay, beginning on page 138 is a combined management letter for the county as a whole, and without completely elaborating on it, for both the board and each of the constitutional officers, it says the same. There were no reportable findings in the prior year. There were no reportable findings in the current year. The annual report that's prepared electronically is in agreement with the audited financial statements. That keeps you in compliance with the law. We determined that you had not met any of the conditions regarding a financial emergency. We did financial condition assessment procedures. I've given you the highlights of those. We noted no deteriorating financial conditions. On page 141, we're required to do audit procedures regarding the board and officers' investment of public funds, and we did, and you complied with Florida statutes. Finally, with 142 is the response by the county administrator, which is appropriate. So be happy to answer any questions.
Bravo, sir. Bravo.
And your staff. I'm just like the scorekeeper.
I had roses, I'd throw them out.
But just to make sure that, the long-term debt, understand that the 22 million for the FRS that's the Florida retirement system. And that's not money that the county has borrowed. That's just the actuarial statement that we have to put on our finance. So at the end of the day, the public doesn't need to go crazy. We didn't borrow that money, and it's an actuarial number.
What would you call Greg doing that? You said some...
Voodoo math?
Yeah.
That's extreme voodoo math. But
I don't know. The accountants don't like that.
I know he gets mad about that every time him and Greg I talk about voodoo math.
But yes, it's an actuarial computation.
That's right.
It's just like now, but something new this year is OPEB, and you have to record that, and it's a higher number. OPEB is other post-employment benefits. It's the concept that even though any retired employees stay on your health insurance plan and pay whatever the negotiated amount is, there's a liability because having old people on your plan makes everybody go up. So there's some calculation they make.
What do you got against old people?
I don't know. I don't have a thing.
The main thing I just wanted to clarify was so the public understands is that we have our long-term debt is very
Very low.
Very low, and we purposely keep it as low as possible.
Yeah, and where you have the highest amount, it's in the enterprise funds, and
Right.
the rates pay for that.
That's right.
And it's for long-term facilities.
Very exciting.
I also, if y'all don't mind, I want to thank Greg. Him and his crew, they do a really good job at this. They pull, like I said, he's one of the small counties that pulls this together, the financial statements, and we work well. Brandy, if you see how all this works, and my staff of Debbie and Cherie and Jessica and all these folks and Brandy work together, and we've created with the clerk's office created a solid system, and it's solid, and you can see it by this financial report. When I first came here, this was a mess.
It was. I remember when we had enough reserves for 2 weeks.
Yeah, and findings, they had findings, etc. So it's that those committed folks and working together and communicating that have taken care of this, and I'm proud of this, and I'm proud for our folks and all you guys. You guys have supported what we're doing, and you hold us to the higher standard, and I think that's what it tells you. And the citizens of this county should be proud of what we do for them.
Why don't you present it next year?
So I couldn't even, I would do it and I'd be done in about 2 minutes. So. I have a tendency to skip to the end.
And Greg and I
But no joke, the citizens should be very proud of what you guys have done and what we as a team have done, because we got a good, sound, solid government. So, Wakulla County.
Thank you.
Thank you, Richard.
Thank you, sir.
Thank you for the early time slot, and we appreciate and are honored working with Wakulla
Yes,
County.
sir.
We appreciate you. So we move on to the consent agenda.
Move consent.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Passes 5-0. First item from consent is number 5.
Yeah, this is the hauling bid. I think the person we have now has had it probably about 15 years or so. Unbeknownst to him, it was rebid. They changed how they bid stuff. It went out of the public works and into the office, so it's nobody's fault. But we only have one bidder, and it's 4 times what we're paying right now. So I'll make a motion, we reject the bid, one bid, and we rebid it. And we'll make the people aware that.
Second.
So anybody want to speak on the subject? I agree with Randy totally. And so all in favor?
Aye.
Passes 5-0.
Gary, did you hear that? Chuck agreed with me.
Oh, wow.
We go into general business.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Chairman. This agenda item number 8, request board approval of an amended administrative regulation 10.03 relating to the neighborhood traffic calming program. Back in last year, the board had directed, you guys had directed us, staff, to come up, refine basically the system that we had before, as it was not exactly a good system, and it was not very clear as to how we implement and how we grade and determine what areas or what sections of road should have traffic calming devices and what they should be. So you asked us for a plan. This is a process that we believe that will be good for the citizens to follow, as well as for staff to follow, and it clearly outlines the steps to go through and thresholds that must be hit, so that, because everybody and his brother believes that everybody's speeding on their road and all this stuff, to come to find out once we do all the stuff, well, actually it was just 1 or 2 people, and it's not as big a problem but in some places, yes, it is a problem, and we've addressed that. But what this does is clearly lay that program out. So I request.
Motion to approve, with the exception that I don't think the policy we had before was that bad. I wrote it. This is pretty close to what I had before, right, Nanette?
It's considerably different.
Second.
So I was concerned that, citizens would have to pay the $250 before anything was really done, and basically they don't pay the $250 until after they've already got the 75.
They have to go through, that's right, they go through the process of an application, then we determine whether it's even applicable or not, and eligible for that. Once they turn the application in, then they get the 75% of the property owners in the impacted area to support it in a petition. Then they bring that to us, and at that point in time, they'll bring the $250. And what that $250 covers is our cost in doing the traffic calming study and the traffic calming plan. And out of that will become the final decision as to go or no go, or here's what should be done versus traffic calming.
Okay.
Maybe they need to ask for a signature and a $10 bill. Put them together.
These things aren't cheap. People
No.
are asking for them left and right, and they're $4,000 a piece. I
Yeah,
think.
and it takes, and for us to do a traffic calming study, I mean, it takes staff, it takes us people off doing other stuff to go do that. We don't have somebody that just does that, so.
Yeah, but
and equipment.
if they've invested the time to get the 75%
That's right.
of the thing, then
That-
we should
that's-
really.
And we'll have talked to them by then, and it's something that's possibly doable.
All in favor?
Aye.
Passes 5-0.
The next item this evening is a request for the board's approval to file an application to close and abandon a 10-foot wide alley located in the Crestwood subdivision. This alley was platted as part of the original 1966 plat of Crestwood subdivision, and it lies along the backside of all lots contained within Block B. The request has come from 3 or 4 citizens in that subdivision that lie along that portion of alleyway.
Motion to approve.
Second.
So, this is a 10-foot alley that's never been used, never been opened.
Never been opened or
We have
utilized for
no future
any
use
public-
plan for it and need
No,
for it.
sir.
We looked at everything that we could possibly put down it, and there was nothing that made any sense.
I don't even
from a
know why
public
it's there.
standpoint.
I don't either, but.
Yeah. We looked at what was
Want
the
to make sure
purpose.
that. it's
What,
not
is there a
gonna be-
water line down there? Is there an electric line down there? What is, then nothing was there, so.
You could put a sidewalk, but they probably wouldn't like a sidewalk in the backyard, so.
No, so we couldn't figure out why it was there, and it just didn't make any sense from our standpoint to put anything in there.
Okay, any other comments? All in favor?
Aye.
Passes 5-0. So, now we go to the county attorney.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I just have one item. We have discussed this item before, and that is the ongoing lawsuit with regard to the website and ADA accessibility. I would like to request an attorney-client executive session to be held right before your July 15th meeting, say 3:30 on July 15th, before your regularly scheduled 5 p.m. meeting, to discuss settlement options and ongoing litigation
Just take
expenditures.
an hour and a half.
No, but you never know. I'd rather have a little bit extra
Motion to
than...
approve.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Passes 5-0.
Thank you, that's all.
County administrator.
Yes, we have some very good problems here in the county. I know people that are involved in them probably don't think they're good, but the boat ramps, as we talked about today, are being used heavily, and they've been discovered. The improvements that we've done have made a big difference. We have many more improvements to do, but we will be making, as we talked about earlier, we're developing we're studying some of these particular ramps this summer to determine the pressure that we're getting on those ramps and primarily the parking that comes along with it, so we can make an intelligent decision as to what level of parking that we need to do versus, an aberration like the anomalies like Memorial Day, Labor Day. We can't,
Snapper
4th of
season.
July, we can't plan for that, but we can plan for a normal weekend loading. So we're going through that. We've got some options. Masha Sands, we've got is open, and this weekend we had some considerable amount due to red snapper season opening up. We had a lot of pressure there, and had some parking issues there that we are addressing. We addressed some of them today. Would ask people, if you're not pulling a boat and you don't have a trailer behind your thing, don't park in a parking spot for a boat. But for a boat truck with a trailer. We have our share of that, just cars parked in where trailers and versus the parking spot. So we're working on better signage and better information there.
The place is a whole lot better than it used to be.
Oh yeah, we're a lot better, and like I say, these are good problems. This means that we're being found, and people are coming here and they're spending their money, and these are good problems to have. These aren't bad. We just got to address them. If we don't address them, that's when they turn bad problems. So we're doing that. Also on the infrastructure side, Magnolia Gardens the final lift is being put on Magnolia Gardens if it'll ever stop raining, and then Wakulla Gardens, we're tying folks on the sewer system there as well. So things are looking up, and as I talked to you earlier, We'll be bringing a couple of things forward. One of those will be, this will be in the fall, a roundabout plan for East Ivan and Ivan Church Road, the public safety master plan that'll take us out 20 years on public safety, and also the boat landing, the boat ramps, etc. So past that.
Whose idea was a roundabout?
Huh?
Whose idea was a roundabout, just out of curiosity?
It was a combination of a lot of folks. We looked at a lot of different ways how to handle that. And roundabouts, a lot of people don't like them, but they're very effective at slowing traffic down and lessening severity of crashes.
Oak Hill,
And
Oak Ridge.
Oak
Oak
Ridge.
Ridge, yeah.
I mean,
And-
I've driven around for a long time, but you get some yo-yo that doesn't know what they stop and they look for cars, but they just keep going.
Oh, they're great. I
Good.
mean, they work really well, and they're very. And there's a lot of benefits to them that the public don't quite understand. But there's certain applications where it makes sense, and there's a couple applications that we want to try in the county that are areas that it warrants it, and we'll be bringing that forward. The biggest thing we're waiting on right now is we need to do a traffic study on East Ivan and East Ivan and Lonnie Raker, but I don't want to do that until school's in session, because then we'll get a better idea of the right turns, left turns, etc., and the activity at that intersection. So we're waiting on that. We've got the design ready, waiting for that so we can help judge the impact.
You have to buy right away too, right?
A little bit, not too much, but yes, some.
So are you considering two different ones? You're talking about one on Ivan Church Road too?
No,
Or
Ivan.
just East Ivan and
excuse me,
Lonnie Raker?
East Ivan and Lonnie Raker.
Okay.
Yes.
All right.
I'm sorry.
Make sure
I get those sometimes mixed up.
Big enough for truck traffic.
Oh yeah. This is big enough, but the biggest thing is it lessen. You'll still have wrecks there, but versus like at Lonnie Raker and East Ivan, coming around that curve, you get T-bone there versus slowing down, and you may have some merge wrecks, but that's a lot less severity.
Big thing about the wrecks is if you do wreck, it's not a T-bone.
That's right.
It's a merge
It's
wreck.
a merge wreck, and so anyway.
It's also a traffic calming device too.
Well, I've noticed one at Oak Ridge is basically just one lane around, but like in Tallahassee at Orange Avenue,
Yeah.
you got two lanes. You got to merge in,
right.
and then I got hung in there and had to go about 3 times around the other day trying to get out of there.
Don't go to Rome.
Running NASCAR.
Call him Mr. Bean.
Don't go to DC. So.
I was running NASCAR for a few minutes.
When
But
I was in the Army in Saudi Arabia, they use those on interstates. I mean,
Yeah.
they're everywhere.
anyway, that's what's coming up. So that's it. That's all I got.
Okay. Citizens to be heard? Commissioner discussion items.
I got pretty much told all y'all this, but CRTPA today, we got the number 3 and 4 priorities changed, so now the Crawfordville section is ahead of the section to the south. Now, the part in Leon County is still like number 9 on the list. I'll keep working on that, but I didn't want
To move
Cause
Crawfordville
too
ahead
much.
of Lost Creek.
to, Crawfordville is ahead of the section that goes to the high school, that's right.
Wait.
That doesn't mean there's funding for it, but
I know, but it's a plus. So.
definitely a plus.
And
The other 2 sections are already fully funded. The part they're working on now and the part after they finish that is coming to East Ivan.
And you're still working on regional stormwater for
Yeah.
Crawfordville?
Yeah. Now, and the critical thing is people need to understand, because we have a lot of traffic engineers in our county, is that the section from Wakulla County into Leon County, that road is not at capacity.
No, not even close.
So that's the reason that the roads that were selected by DOT are. So therefore, that's why we have to travel, is based upon DOT funding and when roads are at capacity. As I said again, that section of road's not at capacity. So all the traffic engineers out here that we have in the county, that's why.
It will be
You know.
at one time.
Facebook engineer.
Facebook engineers, that's
But,
right.
somebody asked me about it. I said, you're right. If you assume everybody that's on 319 in front of Winn-Dixie is trying to get to Tallahassee, that's not the case. There's a lot of internal traffic we have here, so that's why, not everybody's commuting every day to Tallahassee. I know
Yeah.
a lot of people are,
But it just didn't make sense to be doing Lost Creek and not
That's right.
downtown.
That's the reason we had that moved
Okay,
up.
so
But that's a lot of that's DOT funding and CRTPA, but that's where Randy has worked very well, Commissioner Merritt, excuse me,
That's all right.
with the CRTPA and moved that up and FDOT, so that's perfect.
And I was chairman again today for a couple hours.
Oh.
That's too bad.
Dr. V had to go teach his class.
Okay. Commissioner Thomas?
One thing, just like to remind everyone that we do have a special election going on tomorrow for House District 7. We did not have a state representative this year, and so tomorrow we'll determine who our next representative will be. I think we've had about a 7 or 8% early voter turnout, so get out and vote tomorrow.
And Commissioner Thomas, you were moved up to,
First vice president with the Florida
Excellent.
Association of Counties.
Yep.
So
I mean, president next year, right?
year after. I'll be president-elect next year and then president the following year.
big for our county.
Right during election year too, right?
I just want to thank Commissioner Merritt for getting me through my first
Did I tell you
financial report.
Was I right about it?
You were so right. It was awesome. We're going to do it again. You have anything?
We should adjourn.
We're adjourned.
Who wants my copy of the audit before I put it on eBay?
That's high demand.
Mike,
I'll be gone.
it's an ethics complaint. Here, I'll put it on top of this one.